Hello, everyone. Welcome or welcome back to Deutsche Martini. I hope you're doing well and I hope you're having an amazing day. Today's episode is I am going to address something which I have dedicated an entire episode to before, but it is plaguing my mind yet again. And I feel like if I don't address it immediately, it is going to eat me alive. And of course, as you can probably imagine, I'm talking about the meaningfulness and the purpose and the end goal of it all, and just me being a perfectionist, or maybe let's say a recovering perfectionist. So the thing is, I spent the entire week here wondering what I'm going to talk about on the podcast. And it was something that was severely stressing me out and something that was genuinely waking me up at night, and I was trying to force myself to think of something interesting, think of something entertaining, think of something meaningful to bring to the table. And it brought me back to times when I felt like the podcast had to be something so severely meaningful and so severely and extremely world changing and perspective shattering. And I don't like this mentality. I don't like this approach. I feel like this jeopardizes my relationship to the podcast, my relationship to just existing. And the thing is, I have gotten severely better. I have gotten significantly better. Because a year ago, if not even a few months ago, I was just so preoccupied with the concept of perfection and the fact that here in the recording and in the editing and in the podcasting and the marketing, everything had to be perfect, every single detail had to be paid attention to, that it started creating tension in the process. And I feel like this really sets a tone where I might potentially start not enjoying podcasting as much. And this is the one thing I want to avoid. So let me walk you through my thought process that's been going on the entire week. So basically, since I came to Bulgaria, not much has been going on in my life. I literally only work, then go home, and by the time I have dinner, it's already time to go to bed because I need to wake up for work, which I know is not necessarily too drastically different from what I've been telling you is going on in my life in the Netherlands. Although here, the workload is significantly halved because here I now don't have to study. Whereas in the Netherlands, I not only have to work, I also have to study on top of this. And that's why I experience severe burnouts in the Netherlands. But here, everything feels far better paced. And that's why I was looking forward to it because I was like, you know what? I will have half the workload. I will have the opportunity to have my evenings to myself without having to prepare extensively for the morning after. And while this is true, and it's definitely something that eradicates a big portion of the day to day stress I normally experience, it has not given me the freedom which I thought it would. Because I feel like now I am still very much stuck in a routine. It is just a different routine. And it is not a routine that is bringing me that much of diversion and of, change of scenery, even though I'm literally in a different scenery and whatnot. But I feel like now I still am stuck, which is not necessarily what I was looking forward to. And it's literally only been a week. I literally just came 1 week ago. I've only worked for a week here. It's all right. It's nothing too crazy. It's nothing I didn't expect, to be honest. But if I'm also being honest, it's not something I necessarily craved. Because here again, I have far less stress because I know and I'm privileged enough to not have to worry about stuff that I have to tend to in the Netherlands all by myself, because here I have a support system. But when I'm here, just this entire 9 to 5, which I know my 9 to 5 is not 9 to 5, my 9 to 5 is 9 to 6, which is all right. And then I wake up before that to work out. And by the time I get home after work, I'm just exhausted and I feel like I have no desire to do anything. And this is not something that's necessarily enjoyable, because I really, really wanted to spend a really nice summer, because I wanted to practice my hobbies, discover new hobbies, get into new stuff, and just tend to new interests, develop new interests. But I feel like this exhaustion, this routine, is rather preventing me from doing that, even though I have way more hours to myself than I do in the Netherlands. And now here I have my weekends to myself. But I feel like every single day feels the same. And that is a bit scary, because you know how I've talked to you before about this, how, like, why do people complain about the 9 to 5 when you have your evenings to yourself? I feel like it's not the 9 to 5 that is the problem. It is the routine. It is the lack of differentiation between the days, and the lack of diversity just creates a form of living that is funded, let's say, that is power, that is driven by inertia. And I fear this might be a senseless living. And I was very scared that this is going to happen, because that this was going to happen because I want to, you know, the podcast is one of my number one priorities, and I want to bring new and interesting stuff here, and I want to tell you stories about myself. I basically, the way I treat the podcast is my audio diary. And I feel like if there's nothing to reflect on in my audio diary, does that mean that my audio diary is in decline and that it's dying? I would like to not think that that's the case. But because nothing was happening this last week and everything was so peaceful, which is so not ordinary for my life, that I felt like it wasn't podcastable. And I don't mean that things have to go wrong to be podcastable, or that I cannot talk about stuff just in general so that they can be podcastable. But well, what even is podcastable? If this is my space and it's my audio diary about my life, then everything has a meaning. If it's my own life, it has the meaning I choose to give it. But I just felt pressure. And I felt pressure about, self imposed deadlines about the podcast. I felt pressure about continuing a narrative I created. And I feel like this was preventing me from enjoying the peacefulness which I so craved, because this peacefulness, I didn't see it as a well deserved rest from the extremely high paced life that I usually have. I saw it as some sort of boredom. And I spent the week wondering, oh my God, what am I talking about? Like, I don't want to talk about work, because when I clock out, I don't want to think about work. Sure, I complain about work all the time here, but sometimes I just genuinely want to have more to my life than the thing I do for a living. Because the thing I do for a living is the means through which I secure my life and my livelihood. It shouldn't be my entire life. It shouldn't be defining of my existence. So I spend the week just thinking of different topics, and none of them really spoke to me. And I was like, oh, should I talk about politics? Should I talk about a story? But what story do I even have to tell? Should I pick a topic from my bachelor and just, present it to you here? Because, my goal with the podcast is not only to connect with you and present myself to you, it's also to maybe, spread some media literacy, because I feel like, as someone who had to get a degree to and dedicate so many hours to get the knowledge they acquired, I don't think I should gatekeep this knowledge. I don't think knowledge should be something luxurious. I don't think it should be something unattainable. And just because, I put in the effort into studying and invested time and money into acquiring that knowledge, I want to be able to talk about it freely so that it's attainable to others who maybe don't have the means and privileges I did so that they can get their education. But the thing is, I just didn't feel like I'm in such a media scholar mood. And I felt like I was losing meaning. And I know I've talked about this before, how I'm obsessed with this concept of meaning, of purposefulness, of goals, of just making sense of reality instead of just living it. And this got me thinking, and I was like, you know what? This is exactly the thing you should address. This is exactly the thing which, I mean, if it's plaguing your mind and if it's just give a taking away your ability to sleep peacefully at night when your life here is more peaceful than your life in the Netherlands, address it. Address the problem, even if you've talked about this before, because my thing is, what I personally think when it comes to someone, let's say, bringing up a topic 100,000 times, like, sure, it might be annoying to listen about the same thing 100 times. There may not be new perspectives, there may not be new additions, there may not be any development, but I feel like if someone feels the need to bring something up time and time again, then it is worthwhile to talk about. Because if you are getting annoyed by listening about the same thing 100 times, just imagine how annoyed and maybe even exhausted the person is of experiencing it so deeply that they feel the need to bring it time and time again. Just don't think about yourself as the receiver, but think about what it's like to be the one experiencing it. How bad does it feel to be in the situation, to have those thoughts, to feel those feelings, that you feel the need to bring it up to me time and time again, even though there's nothing more to talk about and we've covered every single aspect. So that's why I've decided that I'm going to talk about this purposefulness and meaningfulness and just perfectionism of it all. Because perfectionism is ruining my life. And sure, I realize that I am a perfectionist in many aspects. Well, in every single aspect of my life, if I'm being fully honest. And since I fully comprehended how it's affecting my life and my mental and physical well being, I have been trying to target it and just eradicate it from my existence, or if not eradicate it, at least diminish it, at least become adaptable and forgiving to myself. Because I forgive others for not being perfect, I forgive others for not sticking to schedules, for not, changing the world. Why can I not forgive myself? What makes me so special in my perception that I am giving myself such difficult assignments and setting such unrealistic standards? But you know what's the problem? The problem is that I set very high standards to myself and I work my ass off to meet them. And most of the time, I meet them. And me meeting them means that they're not that unattainable, they're not that unrealistic, and that means that they are not that purposeful. Because unfortunately, the way I see my successes is when I achieve something, I don't see it, and I've put a lot of effort, a lot of preparation, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into achieving that thing, and I finally achieve it. I don't see it as a wow, what a milestone. I see it as a, well, you did what you were supposed to do. Now that's a relief. It's not a sense of accomplishment. It's just a whatever type of mentality. And this eradicates a lot of the times the feeling good about yourself when you achieve something. Because I am amazing at celebrating other people's milestones. And I keep telling them, oh, I'm so incredibly proud of you. I think you did amazing. I hope you never undermine your achievements, and I hope you realize how significant that is that you achieved. But then when it comes to me, I am unable to give myself that pep talk. And it's honestly heartbreaking. And I've been trying to teach myself more compassion towards myself and to teach myself that the things I achieve, even though I achieve them and it sets the standard of what my achievements can and should be, they're still achievements. And just because it has become my normal day to day life and my normal day to day overcoming of challenges, that doesn't mean that they're not remarkable. And the problem is, I also apply this mentality when it comes to the podcast because creating that space, sticking to that place, being that devoted is honestly something rather amazing. But because I'm doing it, I feel like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. And it honestly took me talking yesterday to some friends who were like, no, this is wow, you're so extremely devoted. And it took external validation for me to comprehend what actually I am doing. But I feel like this doesn't necessarily align with what I set out to talk about today. What I wanted to talk about today is actually this perfectionism I have about the podcast. So I don't know if you guys have noticed a change in the way the podcast sounds, but before, let's say a year ago or a couple months ago, more than half a year ago, I was I was deleting and editing out every single oh, every single mistake, and I was re-recording stuff time and time again because I wanted them to be perfect. And now I feel far more comfortable with my mistakes. I leave the I leave the silences, I leave the mistakes in because I feel like this, well, first of all, it's more authentic, it's more human, and on a very practical level, editing and re-recording every single and every single thought because it's not sounding the way I wanted it to sound, that was exhausting. And now I'm just letting myself enjoy the process. And this honestly would have sent perfectionist me in my peak in a coma because I was very obsessed with this concept of flawlessness. And I don't know where it stems from. I don't know why I always feel the need to prove and outprove myself and just display myself in the best possible light, which is not realistic. And now, when I started addressing this with the simply by including the and the mistakes and addressing that I don't know propositions or that I don't know how to pronounce a single word, not world, this has lifted off a big part of the pressure that I put on myself when I started this process of creating the podcast. Now I am letting myself enjoy it rather than execute it at an unmeetable standard that is purely self imposed. And leaving the mistakes in, I feel like it just breaks down the barrier between me and you. Because you get to see me as a human, as someone who is entitled to make mistakes, and I want to be authentic. In my day to day life, I use the word like in every single sentence at least 3 times. I a lot, I make a lot of mistakes, sometimes I don't use the proper grammar. And I want that to be okay. And I'm not saying that, like, oh, we should, abolish all grammar rules and just be whatever. What I'm trying to say is that I want it to be okay for me to make mistakes, and I want it to be okay for me to not be perfect, and I want it to be okay for me to create something authentic rather than something flawless. Because the way humans, the way we are programmed, the way, well, program seems like we are computers, the way we were created the way we develop, it is not anti mistakes. We're so severely prone to flaws. All of us are flawed, and that is okay. And that should be celebrated, that should be something to learn from, and that should not be hidden in a corner and made someone feel lesser than the rest simply because they use the word like every other word, or that they a lot. And this also translated into my planning of what topics I want to talk about on the podcast. Because when I first started the podcast, I was like, I want this to be something meaningful. I want it to be something enjoyable, but also purposeful. I don't want it to be the one of the millions content creation accounts that just creates content for the sake of creating content. I wanted to bring something to the table. I wanted to be the table. And this was putting a lot of stress on the process because at times, because the thing is, it's humans, like, we talk the deep talks, but sometimes you just need to be a silly goose. It's okay to have the deep conversations, but it's unrealistic to think that every single conversation you're going to have in your life is going to be so existentially and deeply meaningful and so purposeful. Sometimes entertainment is enough, and it's very difficult for me to come into terms with the concept of being enough when I've just forced myself to always be my best version. And what really eased my mind when it came to this perception, this approach to topics on the podcast, is actually the podcasts I listen to. And especially when I started listening to The Basement Yard last year. It really, really helped me. And I know that this is going to sound like a severe backhanded compliment, but trust me, it is not. I mean it with all the love I have in my heart. So those guys, they talk so much nonsense. Pure nonsense at times. They can have a 20-minute conversation about leaves. They can have, I don't know, but they seem to be having fun about it. And this is what translates well on camera, but this is also what I feel is the key to success behind the camera. And this is also what I wanted for myself. I, again, want this to be my audio diary, and at times it will be better and more meaningful, and it will be those existential topics, but other times it is just me going to talk about, what I ate for dinner. And I should allow myself to let that be, because as long as I'm having fun doing it, whether it's having the existential crises here and verbalizing them, or it's just me talking about this amazing instant noodles that I found, that should be okay. Because if, as long as I'm authentic and staying true to myself, and I am having the conversations I feel the need to have, even if they are about politics, even if they're about culture, about music, about cinema, about fast food, the podcast is fulfilling its purpose. And I don't need to solve string theory for it to be meaningful. Because I created this place to serve me. And sometimes I notice that I am forgetting this, that I created it for myself, by myself, targeting myself. And I am not creating it and curating it to serve others. And it is very, very difficult to keep myself in line with what the ultimate goal is. And by the ultimate goal, I don't mean, again, solving string theory. I mean having fun. And I don't know why I have this obsession with meaning. I feel like it's because we humans would go crazy if we perceived life or art or anything about our existence as pointless, in the sense that there isn't, an ultimate goal. In the sense that, like, I feel like if we perceived ourselves as the passing beings that we are, as people, as creatures that will be forgotten, and as someone who, in the grand scheme of the world, like, our existence is so minuscule and matters only to a handful of people who will also be forgotten and will cease to exist. But I feel like we're so obsessed with this ideal of purpose, of meaning, that we put pressure on life to be something that maybe it isn't. I don't know. I don't have the answers, but I feel like that is also why a lot of people, and this may be, a hot take, but I feel like this is why a lot of people turn to religion. Because religion propagates, and I'm not using the word propagate now with a connotation of negative connotation. I feel like religion propagates purpose. It propagates meaning, in the sense that it gives you structure, it gives you a path to follow, it gives you rules to abide to, and it gives you, a higher celestial being that guides you, that judges you, that you answer to, that you try to please. Because I feel like we knew that if we were not to answer to anyone or anything, if we had nothing to look forward to after life ends, if we had no guidance, if we had the perception of ourselves, of our life, as just something that doesn't necessarily carry a lot of weight in the grand scheme of stuff, if our perception of life was just what we have here on earth, I feel like we would just go crazy. And that's why religion gives you a lot of comfort in this. Because religion teaches you that there is a higher meaning, that there is a reason why you, and only you, out of, well, not only you, but you as a person, you as an individual, you as a soul and a brain and existence, are extremely meaningful and deliberate. Because I feel like, if looking at it scientifically, if we see ourselves as just the product of reproduction, whose only goal is to reproduce rather than have anything beyond the physical, the way our brain is structured, it would go crazy. Because we have been given, and here again, given implies some higher celestial being that creates us, shapes us, defines us. But the way humans are, we feel, we think, we ponder, and that is beautiful. This is what we utilize in our pursuit of meaning. But this is also one of the biggest, maybe even threats or disadvantages of the human being, because it plagues us, it tortures us. But I would rather take this torture of overthinking, of looking for a higher ideal, than just being born, existing, and dying. And if you're, let's say, an atheist or an agonist or anything else, you're not religious and you believe that life is just from birth to death, that is totally okay. You're entitled to believe whatever you feel like. And I just feel like this is why a lot of people stick to religion, because religion gives you community, it gives you basically a playbook. And this is what we, as people, as beings, as humans, as animals, to feel like we're living than simply compared to simply existing. I don't know if this makes any sense, but in my brain it does. That's why this week, for example, I was like, wait, I want something to happen. I want to have something to talk about because it's been so monotone and so peaceful that I have nothing to say. And I hate the fact that I hate this. I hate the fact that I'm so used to constant stress and burnout and overwhelming that I am preventing from enjoying the peace I so deserve and so craved and so was looking forward to because it's not going to give me content. I don't want to see my life as content worthy. I want to see my life as something I get to live, as something I get to enjoy. But I don't go anywhere. I don't see anyone because I told you last week everyone has exams, no one is here, and it's just work routine and it's exhausting and I have no time for hobbies, but still somehow I find time to scroll and it's so confusing and I don't know how to cope with it. And I feel like I genuinely just need to delete my social media. But this again just now puts pressure on me because I'm someone who creates content on social media. So did I just enslave myself to social media forever? Because I want to create content for myself and sharing it brings me joy, but I also don't want to use social media the way I use it now, and I don't know how to make the switch. And it is really, really confusing, and it's super annoying because theoretically, I have all the knowledge. Theoretically, I am an expert. Well, in quote marks, in quotation marks. But I spent 3 years researching this, and I'm so severely. I feel like I've used the word severely many times today. Sometimes even maybe not in the sense in which I want to give it to, but that's all right because humans mistakes. That's all right, and it's so difficult and so actually annoying when you've spent the last 3 years of your life dedicating your time and efforts to studying media and what it does to humans and to our day to day lives and to our long term existence, and still being unable to put a full stop to your usage when this is what you want. Or maybe not a full stop, maybe a colon, because I don't want to not use social media forever. I just feel like I deserve a break. And it is so addictive, and I feel like now I'm really struggling with battling this addiction. And going cold turkey may be the way, but I don't know. I really don't know. But apart from that, I'm struggling with perfectionism on many planes of my existence. And I have gotten better when it comes to, for example, studying. I've talked to you about this before, how I used to care about grades. Now I don't care about grades anymore. Now I study for the sake of studying, for the sake of knowledge, rather than for the grade. But I won't lie to you, there was a point in my life where I cared about grades, where I strived to have the highest grade possible, strived to have the most knowledge possible, even if that knowledge was retained only until the exam. And now, when I finally graduated from my bachelor and I felt this accomplishment, because my bachelor was one of the few accomplishments I have felt in my life as an accomplishment, I could finally let go of that ideal of being the person who knows the most in the room. I feel like now with the pre-master, I saw that it's more important to know for knowledge rather than for grades, because your grades are not reflective of your knowledge. I have learned a lot of high grades for people who know jack shit about marketing, who know jack shit about media studies. They still have great grades. The grades are not reflective of their knowledge because they cannot even tell you who Stuart Hall is. And I'm sorry, like, maybe if you're listening to this and you don't know who Stuart Hall is, that is okay. But if you are a media scholar, you know who Stuart Hall is. And my perfectionism also is to be seen in the way I practice sport. Now, for example, with my, exploration of running, I've noticed that if I, let's say, I go out for a run, and I go out for a run in the Netherlands rather than in Bulgaria, and I'll touch upon this in a second. But if I go for a run, and my goal is to, let's say, run 10 kilometers nonstop, and if I end up running 7 with the need to pause for a second, I feel like a failure. I feel like I haven't achieved my goal. Or like even if I do run the 10, but I've struggled more, that I've stopped more, I've walked more, I still feel like a failure. And this is not the way I should approach stuff. And that is why, for example, now I even fear running in Bulgaria because, so in the Netherlands, obviously, it is flat because it's the Netherlands, and it's far easier to run 10 kilometers than it is here where the hills are hilling. Because I went for a run and I was like, oh, you know what? I'll just run like a casual 8 kilometers. And then I ended up running on hills and I could barely run a kilometer and a half without stopping. I had to stop every 2 or 3 minutes because it was so difficult. And I just felt like a failure in a way because how is it possible that I can run 10 but now here I cannot run 3 even though the conditions are severely different, not difficult, although they are difficult because it's running uphill is in no way comparable to running on a flat surface. And this now just eradicates my enthusiasm when it comes to running instead of just, encouraging me to go and conquer that hill. And I don't know why my brain functions that way. I don't know why I'm being my biggest, most severe, yet again, severe. Take a shot every single time I say severe until the rest of the episode because apparently I'll keep them coming. I'm my biggest enemy. My perfectionist self is my biggest enemy because it eradicates my ability, my right to be a human. And humans are not perfect. And humans are not meant to be perfect. They're just meant to be authentic. We are meant to be truthful. We are meant to live rather than excel at stuff. You're meant to try. And if that leads to success, amazing. If it doesn't, amazing. The results, the execution should not be defining to your approach to yourself and your approach to life. But it's so much easier said than done. And I really wish I knew where that concept of having to be perfect stems from because I would be able to target it. But now, when I don't know where it comes from and I don't have the money to go to a therapist to tell me, hey, this is where you were broken, although labeling myself as broken is not the best idea I have right now because it just, can become a self fulfilling prophecy, and I would rather it not be. But the way I have started treating my perfectionism in at least certain aspects of my life is by exposing myself to stuff out of my comfort zone, stuff and experiences out of my comfort zone, because my comfort zone apparently is one of stress. So I want to make myself feel uncomfortable to see that this is not the end of the world. It is not the end of the world if I make a mistake. It is not the end of the world if this episode is so meaningless that you're forcing yourself to understand what I'm saying, even when I myself don't know what I'm saying. And so let's give you like the most mundane example ever. One of the ways through which I forced myself to be uncomfortable, to live in discomfort, so that I can feel that it's not the end of the world if things are different, if things are not the way I planned them to be, wanted them to be, prayed for them to be. So I went and I bought a clothing rack. Now, hear me out. I know this is very, very stupid when I say it just like this, but I went to IKEA and I bought a clothing rack because I noticed that I have a shitload of clothes, but I rewear the same two or three outfits because my drawers, I have difficulties closing them. I have that many clothes. So when I open the drawer and it's organized, I don't want to, look for the piece of clothing that's on the bottom because it's going to mess up the entire organization. I just pick the top three t-shirts I have. And that's why I wear the same three outfits. And I was really not enjoying this because I was like, I have so many cute clothes and I want to wear all of them. And I feel like if I see them, I am going to remember I have them and I'm more inclined to wear them. So I went to IKEA and I bought a clothing rack, and it turned out to be far bigger than I had anticipated it to be, and it did not fit in my room. The place I had set out for it, I planned for it, it did not fit there. So I had to rearrange my entire room. And I know that doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but the thing is, I loved my room. I loved the way it was. And I was like, oh, you know what? Just the clothing rack is going to make my room look so Pinterestable, and it's going to give me a shopping like experience every day because I'm just going to look through my clothes that are going to be on hangers. So it's going to be like the Hannah Montana wardrobe. And I hate it. It doesn't fit. I had to rearrange my whole room. I had to get rid of one of my drawers, which I still hated that drawer in the first place, but I was so used to having it. And despite it being organized, the clothing rack, despite it being color coded, it seems messy. And it's really not despite this organization, it's not translating in my perfectionism brain because my clothes have always been hidden. My clothes have always been in drawers in my home in Bulgaria, in my home in the Netherlands. They've always been in drawers, and everything has always had a specific place. And now seeing them out of a drawer, seeing them exposed, despite them being color coordinated, it seems messy, and I just cannot function in a messy environment. I get so overwhelmed by my environment that I just hate it. It's the only thing I think about, and that's why I was struggling a bit with, well, not a bit, I was severely struggling, take a shot, with my preparation for the exams this time around because the only thing I could think of is how much I hated the clothing rack because it didn't fit my perfectionism for neatness in my room. And now my bed is facing a different direction. And I know you're thinking, if you hate it so much, why didn't you return it? Why didn't you go back to the way things were? Because I felt like this is exposure therapy. I felt like I love my room, and my room turning into a place I don't really like. It is stressful because this is the only place I find comfort, like real comfort, and I can just rest and be myself. Why don't you just, return it and get rid of it and go return things to the way they were? I didn't want to because I wanted to prove to myself that even if things are not necessarily the way I planned them out to be, even if things are not up to my standards that I set to myself, it's going to be okay. I feel like my perfectionism is rooted in this nature of mine that is, a creature of habit. Because I'm so resistant to change sometimes, especially when it comes to my space layout, because my room, it's my safety place, it is my comfort, and now my room is not even my room. And the way my room was, it was a copy of my room back home with its pure whiteness and the layout of the bed and the drawers. It just reminded me of home. And there were times when I would just wake up and be like, oh my God, am I in Bulgaria? Am I in the Netherlands? I don't know. And I would wake up and I would feel like the last 4 years have been a fever dream and I'm 17 again. And then reality hits. 4 years ago, I wasn't 17. 4 years ago, I was 19. And then reality hits. Um, but I feel like, guys, I am not kidding you. I stopped recording for a bit and now I'm returning back to this episode. I had to go touch some grass. I had to fight some tears because I hate this. I really, really hate this. I hate being that big of a perfectionist because I feel like now this entire episode didn't bring anything meaningful to the conversation. And I hate that this is something I focus on. And I thought about re recording this and starting from scratch everything and just, creating a step by step with transitions of how I want this episode to sound and how I want to portray myself. Fuck this. Fuck this. Fuck all of this. I'm not going to re record. I am, in spite of myself, in spite of the way I feel, I am going to leave this podcast as is, with all of its messiness, with all of its lack of coherence, with all of its lack of, grander and more, I don't even know meaning. I should leave this. I should let myself be, because this obsession with being my best version, this obsession with being perfect, it is preventing me from being myself. It is a burden I have to carry, and it's a burden I want to, and I feel like it's high time that I let go of, because it's not doing me any favors. In fact, it is poisoning me, because I just look at myself and I see the imperfections. I don't see the accomplishments. And what is that existence? What a. And I feel like now it's just. Normally, I don't think of it like this. Normally, it's not that extreme. But now, when I thought about it and I really just self triggered for whatever reason, I don't like this. I really, really don't like this. And it's something I want to work on, because it is okay if my podcast doesn't change the world. It is okay if my existence is, and it will be, fully forgotten. It is okay if my existence does not contribute to a grander conception of life. It is okay if my existence simply is. And I want to not only preach this, I want to practice it. And that's why I'm going to post this episode despite not liking it, despite feeling like none of this made sense, despite genuinely not being proud of the product right now. Usually, when I'm not proud of a product, I tend to remake that product. I tend to re record. I am not going to re record. This is my protest against myself. This is me cutting the ties to that perfectionism, because that perfectionism, I'm not tied to it. I am chained to it. And it's just limiting me, my expression, my evolvement, my development, and my self. And I don't want this to myself. I don't feel like I deserve this. I feel like I deserve to have the right to be real. And I should let go of this ideal to be ideal, because that ideal is not real, it is not attainable, and I should just let myself be the same way I let others be, the same way I am forgiving to others, the same way I support others and their rights and their wrongs. I should do it to myself too, because I deserve it. And I am tired of being tired of perfectionism. And it is high time for a change. It is high time for acceptance. Because if I continue like this, it's just going to lead to self-destruction, self-eradication, and self-erasure, or I don't know if that's even a word. Like, now I'm fully crashing out and spiraling, and this is going to be on the internet forever. That's okay. That's okay. Because humans are entitled to real emotions and real experiences, and there's no such thing as perfection. The beauty of life is that it's diverse, that it doesn't follow a unilinear, symmetrical path. And if life doesn't follow perfectionism, if life does not accommodate perfectionism, who am I, the person who is indebted to living life? Who am I to feel entitled to demand perfection? Who am I that I demand to not have a human experience, not have an authentic life for the sake of having a perfect life? What even is perfect? What even is a perfect episode? What is a perfect art? What is a perfect human? None of this means anything. Perfection does not exist. Authenticity does. And it should not be eradicated for the sake of achieving something that is not even in alignment with what our nature is. So before I fully crash out and before I start sobbing on here, because I don't want to sob, I am going to go downstairs. I'm going to make myself the best salad in the existence of humanity. There I go again. The best salad. Stop. No, I'm going to make myself a salad and I'm going to enjoy it, even if it's not perfect. I am entitled to being myself, and I should not tweak myself. I should not define myself. I should not diminish myself to a certain ideal that is not compatible with reality. Because I, as a real being, am entitled to a real life. With that being said, thank you so much all for listening to this. I I don't know, guys. I don't know. I'm going to have more clarity next week, I promise. And even if I don't, that should be okay. That should be okay, because in a week a lot of things can change and or things can stay the same, and I may next week have figured out the purpose of life, or maybe I will figure out that life doesn't have a purpose. I don't know. Tune in next week to find out. But until then, stay hydrated, wear sunscreen, and don't support genocide. Bye.